talking about our property? It's
All right, I think we are ready to get started. Let's go ahead and call this special workshop meeting to order. This is a workshop meeting of the City of Fulshear on Tuesday, January the 5th. That's 2016. We all made it unscathed into the new year. It's 6:37 p.m. for the record.
So noted.
For the record, we do have a quorum. All council members are present. So thank y'all for being here tonight, getting off the new year off to a fast and furious start. And as we cover the agenda, I'm sure you'll hear that staff and some of our developers want an even faster frenzied pace this afternoon. Item 3 is public hearings. We'll have our first public hearing at 6:37 p.m. We'll open that. That is a public hearing for 270.482 acres of land in the Churchill Fulshear League that's being conveyed to Fulshear Equine LLC. This is for annexation into the city of Fulshear into our corporate limits. So we'll open up the public hearing. And if anyone is here that would like to speak on this particular item, they will have that opportunity now. You don't even have to sign up if you want to speak on this one, so this is your chance. All right. Being no comments, we'll close the public hearing at 6:38 p.m. And then moving on to our other business, we intended to get the agenda items flip-flopped just a little bit. What we'd like to do is take item 5 first, our regular business. We have all the legal staff and the developers here pertaining to the Fulshear Equine and Mud 174 items. And so I'd like to take all those at this time and cover those first. If council has no objection, I'd like us to consider items A through F, since they're all very interrelated and hinge on one another. And so with that, I guess I'll turn it over to CJ to get the ball rolling, and then we'll go from there. Do I have to read all those, Brady? Might as well.
Well, you're trying to kill time to 6:45 to the second hearing, so
Okay. Item 5, we have item A, consideration and take action to approve a development agreement between the City of Fulshear Investments, Inc., Fulshear Equine LLC, and Johnson Development Services LLC. Item B is consider and take action to approve development agreement between the City and Fulshear Investments, Fulshear Equine LLC, Mason Equest Investment, and Lewis A. Waters. Item C is consider and take action to approve a utility agreement between the City and Fulshear Investments, Inc., Fulshear Equine LLC, and Johnson Development Services LLC on behalf of proposed Fort Bend County Municipal Utility District number 174. D is consider and take action to approve utility agreement between the City and Fulshear Investments, Inc., Fulshear Equine LLC, Mason Equest Investment, Inc., and Lewis A. Waters on behalf of proposed Fort Bend County Municipal Utility District number 174. E is consider and take action to accept petition for consent of the creation of Fort Bend County Municipal Utility District number 174. And F is consider and take action to adopt an ordinance consenting to the creation with conditions of Fort Bend County Municipal Utility District number 174. Now it's yours.
Thank you, Mayor. So this process actually started about almost 4 years ago now. We've had various iterations of this potential development, and the tracts are located on the west side of town. They belong to Mr. Waters. One of them is a 270.84 acre tract that used to be known as the Crutcher Ranch. It's still home to the Crutcher Mansion. The other is a 280 acre approximate tract just to the west of that, which belongs to Mr. Waters, which is the location of the polo fields that everybody I think is fairly familiar with. This has been a long and complicated process. We don't normally do things quite this way, but it's something I think that we staff can now stand behind the recommended approval of. We made a number of changes to the documents this afternoon, so my apologies to council. We were literally right up against this trying to get everything done. But we have an agreement now, I think, in principle on everything with the developer, with their attorneys, and with our attorneys and staff. I'll let Tim walk you through those in just a second. But in essence, the phase one of the development will include the 270-acre tract. That's what's on the slate for annexation currently. That will bring 710 single-family homes into the city. They will form MUD 174 in that area. And then phase two, development, what we call track two, will have its own development and utility agreement with the idea that as that property, as Mr. Waters gets ready to divest himself of that property, it will be included in that original 270-acre tract, annexed into the city, and then annexed into the MUD, and then this development agreement will cover that area. In addition to that, there's a smaller 24-acre tract on the northeast side of FM 359 that Mr. Waters would like included, that we're going to include as part of track two, under the idea that it's adjacent property. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim and let him kind of talk about the substance of the agreements and the changes that were just made.
Okay, you have in front of you 4 different agreements, 2 development agreements and 2 utility agreements. The reason you have 4 different agreements is because there are 2 sets of owners on these tracts and possibly different developers that we think Johnson Development will develop both tracts, but right now Johnson Development is only under contract for tract 1. So what I'm going to do, we have 7 changes that we have proposed. So what I'd like to do is just go over those changes with council tonight and see where we stand at the end of that. And so what I'm going to do is reference, I don't know, y'all have electronic formats, is that correct?
They're trying to download them.
They're very big. So if y'all get confused or have any questions, please stop me and I will do my best to go through.
Are you going to do track 1 and 2 simultaneously? So are we putting both up on our screen, or just are we going to go 1 and then?
It's a little haphazard because of the way we have them all listed out, the 7 different ones. Some will go development utility, but I can do my best to try to do. Why don't we do that? Why don't we try to pull up development agreement number 1, and we'll start with that, and I will go through those changes. Thank you. All right, so development agreement tract 1 is, just to make sure everyone's clear, the development agreement between the city, Fulshear Investments, Fulshear Equine, and Johnson Development Services. So that's the first development agreement. That development agreement has a reference to not only the 270 acres, but also to what they refer to as adjacent tracts. That is going to be eliminated from this development agreement. It's only going to be the 270 acres. So we're going to take out the definition of adjacent tracts. The definition of property with the 270 acres will have an amendment that says the development agreement may be amended to include any land that comes under the control of the developer. And that's already kind of law anyway. If they want to amend the agreement, they can. They can't just automatically do it, but they wanted some assurances that they would be able to come back to us and amend it if they get any more acreage into tract 1. So it's just a small definition change, so there will be no other adjacent tracts that are associated with this property. Okay, development agreement, so that's one change. The section 2.02, you want to go to that section. This will be for both this agreement and for tract 2. Okay, I'm sorry, let me back up. I'm trying to do, Councilmember Crank, what you've asked, and it's a little difficult because tract 2 will have the same change dealing with the definition of adjacent tracts as the first development agreement. We're going to take out adjacent tracts. What we're going to add into the definition of the word property is the 26 acres. That is Mr. Waters' property on the other side of 359, correct? Okay. So we'll have a slight definition change on what the property is, but we will take out all the other references to adjacent tracts, but add the language that if it comes under their control or development, then they can amend the agreement with council approval, of course. So for the development agreement 2.02, for both tract 1 and tract 2 will have the same language change. And that language change, if everyone can pull up section 2.02. I apologize. 2.02 is going to be for development agreement number 2. I know this is getting a little.
Well, both make reference to an exhibit. In track 1 it's exhibit I, in track 2 it's exhibit G.
Correct, that's, okay, we can go over that change now.
Sorry.
That's okay, no, that's helpful, thank you. So track 1, exhibit I is going to change. Right now, there's a line on a map that shows where the major thoroughfare of a road is going to go. They're going to delete a portion of that line and only show it running onto their property on the southern and the northern part. There will not be any road alignment showing on the adjacent property, which is the Hatcher tract. Because at this point, we don't know where that road's going to go, and we can't commit to that alignment. We can only commit to the proportionality of it. So they will build a road that's proportional to their development. We just can't commit to where that will be right now. Neither can they. Okay.
So are we, because I have, like, for example, tract 1,
Okay.
you've got that as the major thoroughfare plan.
Well, and that,
And I'm trying to scroll,
yeah,
I'm
there's-
sorry.
You know, that's okay. In track 1, there's a discussion, exhibit F has the major thoroughfare plan, as adopted, with a revision to include major thoroughfare connecting 359 FM to 93 on the west side.
I get that as
They-
F, but this is going to I.
Later on,
Mhm.
they have an adaptation, I guess is the best way to put it, under exhibit I, of what they propose the alignment for that major thoroughfare to be. And what that exhibit indicates, as included in your packet, and what we asked them to delete, is the carrying of that road, a proportional allocation of that road through the Waters tract for 50%, and then through the Hatcher tract for 50%. And what we wanted as staff to ensure was to ensure that we weren't contractually obligating ourselves to condemn and take property on a property owner that had not had any discussion about that condemnation or taking done. And so proportionally, the two properties will share the cost and the burden of that road. What alignment that takes through the Hatcher tract, we're not gonna show in this agreement because we don't think it's fair to anybody on that side because they had no participation in this discussion.
So what if, just playing devil's advocate, if we just cut that, I'm trying to pull it up and
Yeah,
it's
and
just really small.
maybe I just show council real quick. This is the current map. What the revised map will show is this line here and this line here, and it will remove this line there, because this line is not on their property.
All the properties will still be subject to, they'll still be subject to the major thoroughfare plan. They'll still have to allocate the capacity for the roadway and construct the portion of the roadway that's within their property. But we didn't want to clarify what that alignment might be.
So are we changing language to say there has to be some kind of, because what if we just stop building the road and we have a gap here and here?
But you're gonna have a gap until the Hatcher tract's developed. And we can't force them to do that until they actually develop.
And what preserves our right to force that
It's
at
on
some?
it's on the major thoroughfare plan. It's the same proportionality argument we got into with LCISD.
Right. That's what I'm concerned about.
So that fallback, they propose to follow the boundary line of the existing ownership.
Well, and that's what we had initially discussed with them. In order to be able to do that, Mr. Waters and Mr. Hatcher are gonna have to, I think, do 14 different land swaps. I think Katie can kind of talk to the complexity of the deal.
Yeah, it's more than a dozen different land swaps, because it's a very jagged line right now. It would be nice if it was a smooth line that could be followed, but nobody's gonna wanna drive down that road
And the
that
reason-
follows the boundary
Yeah,
line.
but in addition to the land swaps, the geometry of the roadway itself, you would have, the curves would not make any, they would meet any kind of design standard for safety. So the idea is that each property owner shares the proportionality of the actual construction of the road, the timing of which may or may not fall whenever Hatcher's tracks up.
And that will be exhibit G to track 2. It's the same map, same everything. It will just be amended to remove the line on the adjacent piece of property. And that's the only change on the map. The language in the agreement will remain the same. Has everyone had a chance to see the map? Oh, can you continue? If you already have development agreement number 1 up, there's one small change to both the development agreement number 1 and development agreement number 2 on section 3.05. We're going to add the word then current to deal with fees. so that it just clarifies the language that they will have to pay fees at that point in time in the future, not as the fees that they're set now. So we're gonna add the word then in, so that it's just a point of clarification, so no one's confused on when the fees are set. Okay, and that's gonna be on both track 1 and track 2 development agreement. Okay?
So it'll be the rate at the time incurred.
Yes. Now looking at just agreement number 2, track 2 development agreement, that deals with commercial properties. Track 1 does not deal with any commercial property, it's all gonna be single family. Track 2 is gonna be single family and commercial properties. And so in track 2, if you have that pulled up, it's section 2.02, the language will change on that slightly. And it will, then we have pulled up track 2, okay. 2.02, the second major paragraph. If the city acquires the ability to zone all or a portion of the property, the developer may use any portion of the property for commercial purposes. That way it does not limit them if they want to do all commercial and we'll run along a major thoroughfare. So that language will remain the same. But what this language does is we had up to 50 acres, so if somebody came in and wanted to do 60 acres, the way we had it originally proposed, they wouldn't be able to do that. And we don't want to hamstring them, especially since the city may want more commercial development. So
is that, I thought there was a reference to commercial, like no more than certain amount could be referenced in
Well, that's-
track 1.
What this agreement did, under the track 2 agreement, the way the language was drafted originally, it basically capped the city's ability to zone for commercial within that tract at 50 acres.
Right?
This removes that cap and says that we can, if somebody wants to come and buy 50.1 acres and do commercial, they would now allow to do that because we can zone it that way. Under track 1, there is no commercial at all. It's all R2.
And Tim, yesterday when we spoke, there was reference to duplexes and quadruplexes and.
There has been, all the multifamily has been removed from track 2. Originally, track 2 said single family, multifamily, and commercial. So track 2 is now just single family and commercial. Track 1 is single family as well.
Well, it's single family with non-traditional.
Yeah, there's
homes.
still provision for
Yeah.
some non-traditional brownstone connected units and zero lot line units.
And that's only 15%, I believe, of the total development. It's capped at that. And
No
no
multi.
more. I'm going to switch now to the utility agreements. That's all the changes I have to develop. Both utility agreements, section 2.07, the fee will be 1% for everything. We had 1% and 0.5, they will all be 1%, which is better for the city. So that will be changed on both of them. And both utility agreements, section 2.07, there was an issue dealing with inspections, and city's been having some problems with getting inspections done correctly. So we're going to add language in here that says the district shall ensure that a level of construction inspection occurs to enable the engineers of record to certify the work has been completed in accordance with approved construction plans and specifications, which they should already be doing anyway. But there's been a on-the-ground issue with that happening. So we just want to put it tied in here, so if it happens again, we've got a little more meat behind us in the utility agreements. Okay? So that will be a sentence that is added to both of those agreements. And I think the last change is both utility agreements, section 3.03. We have to account for North Fort Bend Water Authority fees, as well as, was that other fee that we had talked about, there's the North Fort Bend Water?
That was the primary one, but any future ones.
Oh, okay. So we're just going to add a reference in any other applicable regulatory fees as required by law. That just clarifies the language and cleans it up a little bit. I think that is all the changes.
Tim, I have some questions. On the development agreement, I thought our reimbursement rate for agreements was $10,000 for attorney's fees. Why has that been dropped to 5?
Because we've got 2 agreements, utility agreement is 5,000 and development agreement is 5,000, so that's 10,000 total.
Okay.
It's not 5,000 across the board, it's
Okay.
10,000.
So we're working 10,000
Yes.
and we're combining those fees. It's not capped at 5,000, it's per agreement.
It's per agreement, and what I'll likely do, I don't think they're going to want us to, I mean, I can't really separate development versus, so we'll just submit the reimbursement for all the work we've done. There's no need to separate it.
All right.
And I did check with that, because I had that question too when we started this, and we always try to get that in the agreement, so that y'all can get it reimbursed.
Open it up, I guess, if the developer, if you have anything you'd like to say now, or we can wait and have council comments and see if they have any questions of you, we can do that first. I'll open it up to council.
Well, I made a visit out there today and I was impressed. I think they're going to be very good stewards of the land, and I have confidence after the visit. Thank you. Thank you for the tour.
I look forward to having the opportunity to visit with you and to see the land. Thank you for extending the invitation. I like to get myself educated as much as I can on the specifics, so thank you.
Michael, did you kind of talk about the trees, just?
Did you ask if I want to?
Don't mess it up.
We had a very good visit today. We really like where we're going with the tree policy we're putting in place. We're going to work with Greg pretty closely and SWA on evaluating the canopies that are there. We looked at some of the ridge lines where we think we'll be able to avoid quite a bit of it. And it's going to be a good community. We're excited about it.
What do you think your timing will be for starting out here?
As soon as we get our TCQ submittals in on time, which I believe we can, we'll get with Mr. Ross with LJA and start working on the schedule and reevaluation of the overall economics and plan. And the Waters and I are working on that together right now.
On our consent conditions that are in the development agreement, do those mirror exactly?
This falls in line with the ones 4, 5, and 6, with the latest ones we did.
Okay, and it's the 50 voters that it has to be?
Yes.
Okay, I couldn't remember if it was 50 or 30, but.
There is a provision though, which honestly, just dealing with a lot of muds, I don't see how it's ever going to happen. Where if you get the voters within the district to say, we don't want to have it in there, to save costs or whatever, we want to have the meeting somewhere else, they can do that. But it requires a vote of 50 people or more. And it's
Right,
so highly
and
unlikely.
the reason the city did that, the theory behind that is that, I mean, you're taxing the citizens who live within the city, so they should have a right to know why they're being taxed, who is taxing them, the rate that it's being taxed at, what the money's being used for. And if we have all the meetings happening in Houston without notice here, it becomes a little bit difficult and quite frankly an obstacle to our residents to be informed about the whole process. And a lot of people get a shock when that tax bill comes and it says, well, wait a second, I'm in this mud. I didn't even know they had these meetings, they're setting these rates. And so to the fairness of our residents that live here, we want the ability to have the meetings here so that they can participate and have a voice.
Yeah, I just want to point out that one variation, but yeah, it is our plan to have all the meetings here.
And we'll also have a designated representative, CJ. I think I saw that.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Further comments?
All together?
That would be great.
Well, I'm not gonna make a motion to
We did have one person that signed up for public comments on 5B. So I'd like to give you your opportunity if you'd like to speak on this. Sorry I didn't realize it earlier.
Thank you. I'm all in favor of planned development. I think that's good for Fulshear. It's important for Fulshear that it be planned, so I support this in principle. I did hear the four-letter word tree, and so my question to the city council, because 2 months ago the tree ordinance was a very hot button issue for a number of you. You put it to a committee which is yet to meet, so I don't know how much of a hot button it was, but I was just wondering how much of what you were trying to do with the draft of the tree ordinance was included in these development agreements, since trees were so important 2 months ago. That's all I had to say.
All right, thank you for your comments. Go ahead, you'd like to
Yeah.
respond, CJ?
Yeah, if I could. I think first of all, Michael will tell you we made him sweat bullets. We held his development agreement up 60 days. And then he agreed to draft basically a policy statement about their preservation policy regarding the trees, and their agreement to work with the city's urban forester that we've hired to review what trees are going to be destroyed and cleared there. So they've made accommodation. It's probably not everything that's going to be in the ordinance, and I think he's probably happy to be skipping under that line, but I do think that they've made an allowance and worked to develop a plan to address that issue with the city.
Are there fines involved for non-compliance?
No, they're not.
More importantly, on Exhibit J, the development agreement includes a tree preservation and standing guidelines, and it's very similar to the handout that was provided to council at our last meeting in December. And they've provided us some picture examples, and some of these are actual photographs, I believe. But there's also some illustrations or renderings of what they intend the project to look like. And I think Mr. Cox was very candid with council on behalf of Johnson Development in explaining his tree preservation and tree planting policy for this particular development. But it does say that they're not subject to any future amendments on either existing ordinances or anything passed beyond the date of the effective date of the development agreement.
Anything else?
Yeah, make a motion to approve item A through F
With the amendments?
with the amendments added. Correct.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Want to thank Tim and CJ, all the others who were involved on behalf of the city. I know they were grinding it out all afternoon, very, very tense meetings, and also appreciate Mr. Waters, you being here actually, and taking the time to help us understand the tract of land, and Mr. Cox for being willing to accommodate really just some of the preferences and the vision that you've heard from the city council on more than one development agreement. So you should be able to repeat what we're saying up here now. Maybe you could be our spokesperson for the next developer. But we do appreciate your willingness to conform to the city's wishes. So with that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we need to go back to our second public hearing. So we'll open up our second public hearing at 7:05 p.m. This is a public hearing to receive input from the public on a proposal for the city of Fulshear, Texas to annex the following land into its corporate limits of the city by voluntary petition of the landowners. And this is for the 270.482 acre tract being conveyed to Fulshear Equine LLC. Anyone here that would like to speak on that topic? This is the most awkward moment for me too. All right, being none, we'll close it at 7:06 p.m. We open at 7:05, close at 7:06. Now we'll move on to item 4, our workshop, which is item 4A is discussion of legal review of the Fulshear Home Rule Charter. Maybe just as a bit of, thank y'all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. As a bit of recap, we did have our meeting on the 15th where council authorized us to engage a firm, Denton, Navarro, Rocha, Bernal, Hyde, and Zeck, namely Mr. Charlie Zeck. Mr. Charles Zeck, to perform an independent review of the Home Rule Charter. And so that was authorized. I think Michael Ross did most of the correspondence with Mr. Zeck. Following that, he got started on his work. On the 16th of December, the Charter Commission had met again, and they actually completed their work and approved the Home Rule Charter document that each of you has been provided. We had asked that Mr. Zeck would complete his work by the 29th of December, anticipating a discussion of the items here today to give you ample time to review that. He did complete that. Actually, on the 28th, he had a preliminary version of it. Grady, CJ, Michael Ross, myself, we had a conference call with Mr. Zeck to review his findings because, you know, he wasn't apprised to all of the background work that the commission had done, and Grady was able to actually clear up a couple of questions. He revised his findings, and, you know, we got a very positive response, I believe, from Mr. Zeck. So we're here tonight to review those report that was provided. Grady went through, based on his knowledge and experience of the process, provided some explanations to the items. Several things mentioned were previously discussed and decided upon by the Charter Commission. I think, you know, subsequent to our meeting tonight, council will have in their hands to call an election, which Grady's providing us preliminary ordinances and documents relative to that. Each one of the voters in the city of Fulshear will be mailed a copy of the Home Rule Charter, so they'll be delivered that in their hands personally, I guess through the mail, not personally. And then finally, we'll hold a series of public meetings, formally and informally, as we find opportunity to educate the public on the Home Rule Charter and what it contains for the city. We will have to get some advice from Grady on really what the exact position that the city can take. As politicians, we can take positions for and against particular ordinances or the Home Rule Charter in this instance. But the city has some limitations on truly advocating for or against a position. It's my understanding that we're in the business of providing the information, educating the public as a city, as an organization, and let them make their decision. So with that, I'll ask Brady if he would to review the report and maybe some of his explanations on those particular items, and then we'll open it up for council to have any questions or comments that they might like to make on this subject.
Okay, I'm gonna go off my letter that was in y'all's packet, was in the Dropbox of December 30th. I cut and pasted Mr. Zeck's comments, which took out the charter provisions that he questioned. And then I had marked off Zeck's comments, which were his comments, and then I put in red my response so you can see the section talking about his comments and our response. That's how it flows. There were 4 legal issues that he referenced in his, I think, 6-page review. There were 6 form issues, 4 practical issues, and 4 policy issues that he commented on. I'll go through all of those. The first one, and you'll see on the first page of my letter, it was deleted. That was the issue of the 12-month residency period. He thought there was a concern in our conference call, and follow-up call after that, we showed him how it was calculated. He didn't have a concern after that, so he just deleted it from the letter. Rather than go through and renumber all this, it was just easier to keep it matched, so I put delete there. So there isn't a issue on residency on for candidacy under the charter. Number 2, which was Article 3, Section 301 D and E. I call those in the little yellow highlighted. I don't know if you see that on yours. Those are what I call cheat highlights, so I can just go right through and tell you what it's about. This was a prohibition or ban if you are delinquent in paying your taxes or indebted to the city. You cannot, you're not qualified to be eligible for office. His concern was he thought that would be struck down as a violation of the 14th Amendment, and went through and quoted his cases. You will see that in my response that we brought this up to the Charter Commission. There is a split of authority between the courts across the nation. Whether taxes are being indebted, it can be a prohibition to your can disqualify you from running for office. There is no binding legal authority in this district, in Fort Bend County, which is your state district court, or the 1st or 14th district courts of appeals, or the Texas Supreme Court. There is no binding authority that has answered this question clearly. There are some unpublished cases, and I know I'm getting into the fine hair of legal theory here, but unless you publish it, it doesn't bind you to follow it. There is a federal Fifth Circuit case that has commented on a case out of Longview, which was addressing a case out of the 6th Circuit and the 3rd Circuit, which I didn't go look up my federal circuits, but they're elsewhere. They could be California, Hawaii, or Ohio, or wherever. But all commenting on this. So because there was a split in the authority, we made this disclosure to the Charter Commission. The Charter Commission was willing to keep that in there. It was their call. Even though that could subject the charter to a judicial challenge, they thought it was worth it. As I said, warranted by a good faith argument for the extension, modification, or reversal of existing law. So they, as they say in sports, they called the ball. Or in baseball, they called the ball on it, and they wanted to keep that provision in there. I will say, which is not in the report, also included in your Dropbox is this spreadsheet called Fort Bend Home Rule Charters, 41 pages of sleep-inducing verbiage. You will see under number,
It's in our home rule charter.
This right here. I'll pass that around. I printed it on bigger paper. My eyes aren't as good as reading. I couldn't get one.
on page 4, under numbers 12 and 13, we went through and we bracketed each Fulshear charter section. And you can see that Rosenberg has this in their charter. And no other cities do. But again, this is what the Charter Commission decided to do. Now, I don't know if you want to ask me questions as I go through this, or you want me to deliver my whole sermon and then you can ask me questions or come forward. It's up to y'all.
Any questions at this point? All right.
Yeah, just on your rebuttal or reply 5 here that you presented to us, you make a reference in each one of these things to either agendas and/or minutes.
Correct,
Those are public information, right?
correct. They are on the website,
Right.
the City of Fulshear's website. You can go check the, page 9 of the December 8 minutes where this was discussed. So we went through, OCR is a wonderful thing, you can find it fast on it. So you can go through and find where this was discussed, as it was discussed in July and August. Number 3, I want you to circle that when we're gonna come back to it. Because this is the at-large position that's caused the most discussion in the city. And Mr. Beck hits that 3 different times, and I want to just discuss it at one time. So we'll come back to number 3. Number 4, Article 8, Section 8.02, General Prohibitions. This is the anti-bribery prohibition. Mr. Zett commented that he thought this would be struck down. Because it's inconsistent with the election code, that we couldn't, as a home rule charter, as a home rule city, could not add additional qualifications. And without reading everything he said, dropping down to my comments, the bribery issue was of particular concern to the Charter Commission. They discussed it on October 13th, December 8th. This was brought up to the Charter Commission. It was fully vetted by the Charter Commission. They were told that the charter could be subject to a judicial challenge. And I will say this about the Charter Commission. They were very dignified in their debates. They were very independent in their debates. They were very efficient in their debates. But there are some policy issues that they just bowed their back. And they said they wanted in the charter, and they understood the risk that the city may be involved with the charter, but they wanted an anti-bribery that says if you are convicted of bribery, you are banned from office in the city, period. We believe that this section is not Election Code 141.003 can be harmonized with our section. And again, this was fully vetted by the Charter Commission, discussed, brought back up several times, and voted on to keep in the charter.
So Brady, one of the things that Mr. Zekin's opinion writes is that he's concerned about not giving deference to pardons, exonerations, things of that nature. Can you speak to us about the impact of an exoneration or a pardon, and how it, if it does or does not remove the disabilities of the felony, and how that comports with the language as proposed by the Charter Commission?
Well, I'm going to defer a bit to Byron because he handled this section, but we specifically talked, I'll give you the big picture first. We specifically talked about pardons. Or if you paid your debt to society and you served your time. But they were so concerned about that effect on municipal operations, they still wanted to take that risk. Byron, if you want to fill that in.
There was some debate with the commission about whether something like a pardon would entitle someone to a second chance if they were convicted of bribery, but the prevailing opinion that ultimately made its way into the charter was that the commission had faith in the judicial system, and so if someone were convicted, that would be enough for the commission to decide that that person should be ineligible to run for office. The only thing that I think might make someone eligible after that is if they go through the judicial proceeding of having their conviction expunged, and so that essentially nullifies the conviction, and that I think is the only thing that would allow someone to become eligible despite being convicted.
This is state bribery only. The commission did not take up the issue on the federal level of bribery. So I guess you can cheat Congress, but you can't cheat the state.
Brady, I had a quick question.
Yes.
On the first two things that we've talked about, One of them was on the qualification about owing taxes to the city. This one is about a general prohibition for bribery. If this document is challenged and those two things would be struck down, the rest of the charter would remain intact. And
There's a severability clause, yes. Short answer is.
so if this is challenged, they say, okay, well, if you're convicted of bribery, you can run for office. That's really out of our control.
Yeah. I guess you can have the robberies anonymous sue the city, or you can be a convicted robber and sue the city, but that's why we have courts, and the commission wanted to take a stance and make a stance. They didn't take many stances, hard line stances, but this and taxes and indebted to the city were the three.
Okay.
Those were the,
Is that also addressed in the chart that's provided on the form of government? I just didn't see it. I didn't know it's 41.
robbery. I
Yeah.
don't remember. I didn't look that one, I didn't go
Okay.
to look that one up. I can later, but I haven't looked it up. All right, those were the 4 legal issues. We need to come back to the at-large position, but those were the 4 legal issues that he focused on. I'm next going to his part B.
Okay, let me make just one comment I failed to make before I turned it over to you, but C.J. McDaniels, the chair of the Charter Commission, he is here tonight just trying to observe and take in all of council's comments on the review document so that they can determine whether they need to meet again and have any further discussion. So thank you for being here, C.J. Proceed. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is not the 10 Commandments. I'm not Moses. After 2 years, this document can be amended. It can be amended by petition of the residents of Fulshear. It can be amended by establishing a charter review commission. In fact, Richmond has already got a charter review commission of the charter they passed in 2013. Or the council can just directly propose amendments and then go to the voters to vote on those amendments. So this, over a very long process, it's more glacial than the 440, but it can be amended and fine-tuned as you see how it works. Okay, farm issues. I'm on, I didn't number my pages, I'm on B number 1. This is the appointments issue. He had a problem. He thought that this section 3.01C was not clear enough as to the appointments. You can see what we said. And I chose the word, most of the charters have the word meet the following qualifications. I added maintain in there from personal experience. There is the last 2 mayors of Piney Point Village moved out of the village, but because they didn't have a provision that says maintain, they could still be mayor and live in Houston, in a different city. Don't think that's right. Charter Commission agreed. So it says must meet and maintain the following qualifications to be eligible for office. You can't appoint somebody that's not eligible for office. So if you, I just don't see what the problem was. We say meet and maintain means meet and maintain for appointments as well as elected officials. Pretty simple. Number 2, I want you to circle that one because that's the at-large position. We'll come back to it. Number 3, Mr. Zeck had a problem with the terminology we used, regular election. You can see he thought general election was more consistent with state law in the proposed charter. We were following Local Government Code Section 22.010B, which uses the phrase regular municipal elections. If you do a Google search of the Texas Secretary of State site, it's regular elections. I also went and pulled Mont Belvieu's charter that Mr. Zeck drew up, and that's the one I did the second opinion on. And I list out every place he uses the term regular election. The CF means cross-reference there. I also went back and added, after the phone conversation, the sections where he used the term general election. So those terms are basically interchangeable. Richmond's charter, which both Mont Belvieu and Richmond's charter were adopted in 2013, they use the term regular election. So we stand by the drafting on that. By the way, this chart that I'm referring to, it's got Fulshear, Katy, Missouri City, Richmond, Rosenberg, Sugar Land, and Stafford in there. Those are the home rule cities in Fort Bend County, so that the analysis can be done and compared that to what Fulshear is going through. We use Mont Belvieu, an out-of-county city, both as a control, so it's outside of Fort Bend County, and you can see what else is there. I'm familiar with it since I represented, and Mr. Zeck had drafted it, so those are however many cities that are in that review.
And just to point out on that specific one, there was no case law cited for that particular instance, that there's a distinction between regular versus general. And no case law that you're aware of that has a that doesn't have a legal distinction.
All right, number 4. Again, this is the elected or appointed officials convicted of bribery or permanently ineligible. He wanted to change any person as opposed to any elected or appointed official. If he is saying that it was confusing that you had to be convicted of bribery when you were holding office, as opposed to prior to that. The part we say is that 8.02 A through D, if you read that whole section, it addresses city officials appointed, elected, compensated, or not compensated for the general prohibition, and that includes any person. Now, a lot of this argument at this point is saying, well, if I say you have to have a Ford pickup to do this job, and he comes back and says, no, you have to have a Chevy pickup, is there a difference between a Ford and Chevy? Well, yes, Ford and Chevy owners will tell you that, but really it's a pickup that gets you there. So this is just language selection of any person. Franchises, number 5, section 2.02. This is one I actually agree with Mr. Zeck on, and we discussed it at the Charter Commission meeting. Mr. Zeck did not have it at all in Mont Belvieu's charter. He thinks it's I can't pronounce it there. Superfluous. We discussed the fact that it was not in Mont Belvieu's charter. We also discussed the fact that Richmond's charter, drafted by Frank Garza out of San Antonio, went on for 3 pages about franchise. We compared the two. The Charter Commission stated they want at least some reference, so we compromised between 0 and 3 pages and came up with what we have. Doesn't hurt anything. It just says you've got franchise powers and you can grant franchises. As he stated in his phone conversation, the state is taking more and more of that away from the states, i.e. telephone, cable, electricity. So it's becoming less and less of an issue, but there is at least some in there that we can hang our hat on and say you've got a right to grant franchises. Okay, number 6, Again, this is a regular versus general election, and it was compensation and expenses. And we'll get back down to that in one of the practical issues later, but it's regular, general, it's the same work. That's all the form issues. Practical issues under number C. He said the 3.03 did not address residence requirements from single-member districts. That's for a reason. There are no residency requirements for single-member districts. We discussed that the charter, there is a residency requirement under state law, and there's a residency requirement in the charter to live in the city. But we didn't want the gamesmanship that I've seen in saying, who did you really move into that district? Or an argument or a lawsuit on whether they really lived in that district that amount of time. Well, you had a rent house there. Well, were you really staying there? Is that really your residence? Is that your homestead? I've handled one near election issue between the mayor and an opponent at a different city. The opponent was saying he lived in the city and he had a house in the city. Everybody knew he lived with his wife outside the city on a little horse ranch. And it really comes down to quote Elizabeth Taylor, Texas is a state of mind. And really your state of mind is the proof of where your residence is. Where do I intend that I live? Now, you may have a house in Houston, you may have a weekend house here. You can declare your residence here in Fulshear, if this is your weekend house, and only come here on the weekend. But that's your right to declare that as your residence. We didn't want that type of, the Charter Commission did not want that type of fight during elections. So there are no residency requirements for single-member districts, just to live within the city. Vacancies. A little-known section of the local government code says that if you miss 3 consecutive regular city council meetings, you can be kicked off council for being absent. Let me emphasize consecutive and regular, not special, not this workshop. It has to be your monthly regular meeting. It has to be 3 months in a row. So you can miss 2, make the 3rd, and it starts all over. He thought it was harsh. What we were doing was following that section 22.041B, which is just consistent with the local government code and what you're operating under now. The charter gives the city council permission, and it's working in other cities I represent. There's just a standard line item on the agenda that says approval of council of persons absent. And it's not a consent agenda, but it's as close as you can get to a consent agenda that no one's turned down a council member for going on vacation or an operation or a death or whatever they have. So it may be harsh, but it's no harsher than what you're operating under. Number 3, we're getting towards the end. Number 3 is there was no specific process in the charter to handle violations. And we discussed this because Mr. Decker drafted some very good procedures that were included in Mont Belvieu's charter. But the Charter Commission did not want to load up the charter with process. The Charter Commission wanted you, council, to pass by ordinance. If the charter passes, there will be several implementing ordinances that you will have to pass. But they wanted those processes drawn up by you, not dictated to you by them. And they wanted it to be able to be tailored and amended by an ordinance, by you, not having to have a charter election every 2 years and a vote on whether to add, pulling something out there, a 10-day notice or something like that. So they're trying, the Charter Commission is giving me that flexibility and responsibility see where I referenced that in the minutes. Number 4, circle that, and that's the last circle. That's again on the at-large positions, and we'll come back to those. All right, D, policy issues. Administrative officers, the city manager and the chief financial officer are the two officers designated as officers. Frankly, it's to me as much ado about nothing. You by ordinance can designate who the officers are. The local government code designates for you for a general law city who officers are. But if you're going to authorize someone else to, the city secretary to sign something with the chief election official at Fort Bend County, you do that by ordinance. And you say she's authorized to sign, that gives her the authority to sign that document. Again, it's more flexibility. I think Sugar Land has, the council shall appoint the city attorney. Some of the older charters have this, council shall appoint an attorney for the office of city attorney. It doesn't make a difference. You're appointing an attorney as a city attorney. So, there is a body of case law that goes over what officers are in tort law and contract law. So, yeah, we designated 2. We didn't think any more needed to be designated or have a whole class of officers for the city. Number 2, the positions of chief of police, finance director, and city secretary require the approval of city council for appointment and removal. The purest form of city manager, form of government would be those positions would be appointed and terminated by the city manager, not by city council. The whole policy, philosophy of the city manager form of government is y'all 5, or in the future y'all 7, are a policy board. You're like the board of directors. And you set the policy, and the city manager enforces that policy. And that presupposes personnel too. It blurs the line, and the Charter Commission was aware of this. It blurs the line to blur that authority, and you take the chance of city employees trying to curry favor with you to get hired or to not get fired. The Charter Commission discussed all of this and decided on this position. They didn't want an all-powerful mayor. They didn't want an all-powerful city manager. They're trying to divest as much power in a body, which is the city council, and not in the body to the voters. They could have easily said, none of these are council appointment, council approval to terminate or hire. They didn't. They could have split the difference and said, well, all right, city council gets the approval to hire, but not the approval to fire. They didn't do that either. And they did this as what they did. But it was their policy call, so they called it like that. Initiative, referendum, and recall. There is a provision in the charter that, 2 provisions. One provision prevents IRRs, what I call it, initiative, referendum, and recall. That exempts certain categories of laws like tax rates. You could never operate a city if your tax rate was under a constant threat of an initiative or referendum. It's already built into the tax code because you've got the rollback rate, and y'all all know about the rollback rate. The other section is any laws existing on the books when the charter is adopted are not subject to IRR because they were passed before that charter was implemented. and that is in Mont Bellevue's charter as well as other charters. You can look in the spreadsheet and find it. All right, the last one, number 4, is basically it requires a charter amendment to increase council pay. At one of the 2 meetings with the Charter Commission, or one of the first meeting with the Charter Commission, that was brought up to me. Went back to the Charter Commission. The mayor had already received some compensation. The Charter Commission reconsidered the question of whether council should get paid for some amount for their civic duty that they are spending many moons up here on. The charter, it would cause a robust debate among the commission, but they agreed to it, but they wanted to make it difficult to get a raise, that if you wanted a raise, you had to go to the voters to get a raise. Basically what it means. So it was drafted purposely that way, so that you had to go to the voters if you wanted a raise. They didn't consider it a waste of a charter election. Charter election every 2 years, no sooner than every 2 years, requires each amendment to be separated out, and that, I know in talking with Michael, Westview did that, and it was a council initiated raise issue that went to the voters and it was approved. So, even though you have it every 2 years, you can have as many issues in that election as you want. Baytown did a major review of a revision of their charter, and they had like 24 different amendments on one election ballot. So you just load it up and go for it. They hadn't done it in a long time, so it was time. So as I take it,
how does that practicality work? I mean, I'm assuming you don't say, oh, well, we need to fix this, let's have a charter election tomorrow. Wouldn't you start probably documenting, okay, this maybe could be tweaked, this could be improved, and then after some period of time, you have some body of items that you would like to consider changing, and then you bring that to, has that been your experience, Michael?
Yes, sir. What happens is, assuming you're the home rule city, and your council manager, form of government, is typically your manager is one of the first people to sit down with that charter commission if they're called and assembled by the council, or the city manager is bringing, and it's because councils turn over time. So the next time the charter amendment comes up for discussion may be in an orientation with the new council, that this is something that was mentioned by the previous council as it was important to them, but their term was up. If you all would like, it could be considered for placement on an upcoming May ballot, within the 2-year period. So that's typically how it worked, and I, as the manager, would just give them those highlights, and if they were important to them, they could include them, or they could appoint a charter commission and have it reviewed first and then placed on the ballot, either one. And most of them were actually just put on the ballot by council. There were 2 charter commissions that were seated during my time at the other city.
Were those done in conjunction with just the regular May or November?
They were done with regular elections.
there are only 2 uniform election dates, May and November.
Right.
So it would be a May or November election. And
And our charter, as proposed, just specifies that it has to be done, I would assume, in conjunction with the election code, which is 78 days after an order, whether it's an whatever form of IRR comes down in.
correct.
I'm sorry, what does IRR stand for?
Initiative, referendum, or recall. Initiative is the voters initiate something they wanted on there that council has not acted on. Referendum is where the council has done something the voters are not happy with, and they want a referendum. For instance, an initiative in Baytown, they were mad, the firemen got mad at the city council, so the union got an initiative petition going to require 3 firemen on each fire truck. Council was trying to cut it back to 2 firemen per fire truck. So now there's a charter provision that says you gotta have 3 firemen every time you roll a fire truck. And that's a popular vote, and that was an initiative. They can have council, after a certain amount of time, can come in and propose an amendment to remove that, but good luck. Then the final one is recall, where a council person is recalled from their position for whatever reason. And differing petition requirements, and the commission set that one higher than the initiative in the referendum. Are we ready to move on to at-large? Okay, at-large has caused the biggest debate, as I said, during this whole process. At the very first meeting, it was debated and proposed to adopt or change from your current status as 5 at-large, without place, plurality voted members. And by that I mean everybody votes on you now. You're without place, which is very unusual. Most cities have place 1, place 2, place 3, place 4, place 5. And so that means you run for place 5, and anybody that wants to run specifically against you just runs for place 5. And you know exactly who your opponent is, and vice versa. And it's a majority vote. Now, I mean, what you're currently operating under is a plurality, as you know, and it's the top vote getters on how many positions are open. I always wondered why there was an imbalance here, why the mayor and 3 ran in one cycle and 2 ran in the other cycle, as opposed to 3 and 3. Bill Archer informed me that no one signed up one year for a position. And they finally appointed somebody, and it got off because they didn't have it for the full term. So to fix all that, to make it even, and on the debate under the Voting Rights Act and the 14th Amendment, 1 person, 1 vote, the commission proposed and adopted changing from 5 at-large to 5 districts, which you have to reside in the city. You have to reside in the district to run. There's no length of residency requirement. And that means you means a majority vote, and you know who your opponent or opponents are. You're not running against the pack. You're running against, or they're running against you as an incumbent for a specific position. There was a great debate on whether it should be, or the number of single-member districts, and whether there should be at-large positions. And there is, you can read it in Blodgett, and all this has been in the Charter Commission Dropbox from day one. You can see the debate from Blodgett and Texas charters. And by the way, Zech's paper, if you read the abstract, concludes nothing's really changed since 1994 in Texas council composition. So for the last 21 years, 22 years, nothing's really changed on how it's done. Yes, you can, there are different ways mayors are elected and that type of thing, but it's switched from 5 at-large, no position, plurality vote, to 5 single-member districts, majority vote, and 2 at-large. The theory is at-large positions represent more of the city as a whole. The theory is that a member of that district is just going to keep those district voters happy, and not necessarily look at the big picture. I don't know that I agree with that, but that's what the theory is. So they voted to have 5 single-member districts and 2 at-large, and increase the council to 7, with the mayor not voting except in the case of a tie. Then, the Evanwell case came up for consideration that was argued December 7th. And there is a, I'm looking for here it is. We discussed this. This was the Houston Chronicle headline from August of 2015. It's the Voting Rights Act of at 50 faces new challenge, and it talks about Pasadena getting sued by the Justice Department. So it was brought up to, frankly, give the charter, or to give the, let me back up. The Charter Commission wanted to give the council maximum amount of flexibility because we're no longer under pre-clearance. Let me make a footnote there. The current Justice Department is trying to put Texas back under pre-clearance by a lawsuit out of San Antonio. But we're not under pre-clearance right now.
I'm sorry, Brady, to be pre-clearance for those of us who are attorneys, what does that mean?
I'm sorry, I should have made that
I'm sorry,
clear.
I'm just not,
No.
I cannot follow all the language.
Right. The Voting Rights Act requires the states that didn't have a percentage of voter turnout on a magic date back in the 60s, that they then, any changes they made in any voting districts or the way you vote had to be pre-cleared by the Justice Department, even if you moved a polling place. For water districts, for mud districts, I mean, it went down to went all the way down to the littlest thing. Some precinct voting places are in people's garage, and they've sold their houses, so, and the new owners, get out of my garage, I don't want you here, you know. They needed to move the precinct place, so they had to go to Washington to get permission to move the precinct out of somebody's garage. I mean, literally. All the southern states, because of Jim Crow laws and all that, were under the Voting Rights Act, and Alaska. Now you ask me why Alaska? Because it snowed during the election, and they had real low voter turnout, and it triggered that they were under. And you can see how all that red on the paper there, that this first was discussed July 28th and went all the way through December 8th. The commission really did not want to try to dictate to council or tie your hands in the future on what any type of restrictions or qualifications would require. Like I said, their deal is we want the federal Constitution with 24 amendments, not the Texas Constitution, literally with 491 amendments. If the charter gives you an option to do something, you have to do it legally. You have to do it pursuant to the law. So his question was when, and Tiana went on 3 under legal. Okay, sorry. And his concern was, well, if you call an election, for instance, February 19th, and all of a sudden you come in there and pull the trigger, well, you're going to have to live in this district, you're going to have to do this, you're going to have to do that. That's after declaring for an election. That subjects the city to a lawsuit. And the commission believes the council will act in a legal and proper manner in making these qualifications in time enough before you call an election. Otherwise, you're gonna subject the city to a lawsuit.
Well, wouldn't that apply to any amendment? Even if you call an election and say we have a referendum, the time would be when it's considered, and it couldn't be enacted until it fully goes through the process. So time is always, I mean, if you call an election, you're bound by what the rules are at the date you call the election, and anything that changes would apply to the next one. But that would be for any change, right?
Correct.
Okay.
He just wanted it in the charter to say before the qualifications. I'm saying you have to apply, you have to obey the law anyway.
Right.
I mean, we always have to obey the law.
I know this is not what we said in here, but at least on what I've read, but I don't know. Are you gonna be guiding us through the process going forward? And I know this is not exactly the subject of this, but I mean, as I was reading the, the specifics and the timelines and everything, are you gonna be leading us process-wise to the next stage?
Yes, just as yes, I did that in Mont Bellevue. When the Charter Commission finished there, he was done. So I did my second opinion on it. They did some of the changes, they didn't do some of the changes. Then it came up to council to call that election, and we went through the whole process, the mail outs, the notice of elections, the Q&A to non-electioneer, because you still have the election code you have to follow, and then the council procedures and other implementing requirements. Yes, short answer is yes.
Because I think the education is always important. That is the key to, we probably should have gone through this process at the very early beginning to understand how humble charter, is going to evolve. So
Sure.
we are where we are, so thank you.
Yeah, the process now is, I'll get into processes, is pretty straightforward. The Charter Commission finished their work December 18th and proposed, or December 15th, whatever I put on the charter, December 15th. They made that proposal. Chapter 9 of the local government code, that says this is how you create and adopt a charter commission and create and adopt a charter, says council must call an election at the next uniform election date. That date is February 19th is the last date to do it. That doesn't keep the charter commission from coming back and making, if they want to change regular to general, I don't care, I think it's the same word, but okay, if they want to meet and do that, fine. But that doesn't reset the clock, it's still February 19th to do it. That then is, you've shown on the timeline in your Dropbox, certain milestones have to be met. The city secretary has to mail a copy of the charter to every registered voter in the city. At the last election, I think the registered voters was 3,200 and something. I'm sure it's grown, so you're gonna have a massive mail out.
About 35
3,500 copies. Hopefully you can put it on two sides of the page, and maybe do 4 pages per side, but what the law requires.
Mayor, may I address, Chairman?
Sure.
Mr. McDaniel, you had an opportunity to participate in the conference call with our city attorney, the mayor, both of our administrators, and Mr. Zek. And did you take all the information, the memorandum, the opinion, and disseminate this to your commission?
Yes, I sent it individually to each member with the comments, so that everyone would understand each of the items that he pointed out, both in terms of legal issues and form issues and so forth. I have responses from Bill Archer, Randy, Tommy Royer, John Dowdall, maybe one other. basically, the consensus was that these are all things that we discussed, these are things that we understood going in, and we're happy with our work. If city council has things that they want us to evaluate, we'll be happy to meet again and evaluate.
I would urge y'all to look at this, because we really tried not to go too much off the trail. We did with bribery, we did with taxes and indebtedness.
Franchising.
And, well, okay, that's not much off, that's a step off the trail. But you can see how other cities, have done it. And, some of the charters, Missouri City is the oldest charter in the county, and that's 1974. And then the shortest time span between two cities drafting a charter was 4 years. The largest time span was 14 years. Last time it was done was 2013, and then prior to that it was 9 years prior to that time. It's not done very often. But
Well, Bellevue was 2013.
November is when they adopted it. Richmond adopted theirs in May of 2013. If the mayor will allow it.
Can I address franchises?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
CJ shared with us the frustration, literally, of losing a lot of control of the franchise. And we understood that. However, none of us know what technology might suddenly come upon us going forward in the future. We just didn't want to close our doors and not have the city have the right to have a franchise. If some significant new technology that none of us even fathom would exist, and suddenly somebody wants to get it into the city of Fulshear, we didn't want to lose the revenue stream from that. So he said, let's put something in there that protects the city, but not 17 pages like the city of Richmond had. So that was our thinking.
Any comments or questions?
Anybody have any comments on any other section of the charter that Mr. Zach didn't address? I've stuck with this thing, and for 6 months I can probably talk about it.
Yes, annexations. In my talking to constituents and my review and reading it, where's the annexations address? And have we taken a look at that? Because I think that's one of the critical things that, we're looking forward to, is the ability to unilaterally annex without the petitioner coming to us. What's the timeframe? Is that covered in here or not? Is that gonna be part of the procedures
Oh,
and process?
annexations? Oh, I thought you,
It's
the
still
allergies,
annex,
no, the allergies, I thought you said annotations, I'm going to flip.
Annexation.
No, annexations are addressed in there.
That's section 2.3. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Under general law, if you have a freeway law, a large general law city, well, let me back up. Y'all were a 500-member farm community. Your three-way light bulb was about 50 watts, and that's not an insult, that's just how cities work. You are now 6,000 to 8,000 person general law city, you're at 100 watts. If you go home rule charter, you get to be 150 watts. You get more power. One power of that is you do not have the right to just go out and annex. General law cities do not. You have to have permission of the landowners. With home rule, you now have the power to unilaterally go out there and annex. Now, before the landowner gets agitated over city was approached by the Waller County RID number 1, Waller County Road Improvement District number 1, which is where Rooms to Go is. And they petitioned us to come into our ETJ, and we did a special purpose annexation to get sales tax from there. We could not have gotten them unless they came to us first and asked to come into the city. If we were Katy, if we were Richmond, if we were Rosenberg, if we were Houston, we could have simply, as long as we follow the law and the procedures involved, simply gone out there and annexed them and brought them in whether they wanted it or not. And that's a very simplified version because you've got bond issues and contiguous issues and all that. But it is that's probably the single most important power that a city has. Another, Councilwoman Messick, is last week, and it's public record so I can talk about it. Last week, the city of Meadows was sued by Texans for Justice. Texans for Justice is an organization in Denton, Texas, and North Texas representing sexual offenders. Meadows was sued over an ordinance I drew over the registration and the number of feet you had to stay away from schools, parks, where sexual offenders can congregate. There is a Texas Attorney General opinion that says home rule cities have that power to regulate sexual offenders because the state has not preempted that. He also said that general law cities do not have that power to regulate and make sexual offenders stay a certain 1,000 feet away or whatever. So just like Fulshear is surrounded by Houston, by Katy, by Richmond, by Rosenberg, all home rule cities, they have a power to say sexual, I call it sexual predators, sexual offenders have to stay a certain amount of feet away. That has a tendency to try to herd those people into general law cities that don't have that power to regulate. Meadows' position when they adopted it in 2004, 2005, and I will admit I drafted it, and I told them, it's questionable. They said our kids are as important to us as kids across the freeway in Stafford, in Houston, every place else. So now they've been challenged, and you don't think that mayor and council are hot and mad that their ordinance could be, and they have an actual sexual offender trying to move into the city, and so we think it's a big setup, but it's on file in Richmond in the district courts down there. So with the power of a home rule city, you have that power to regulate that type of activity. Today, you don't. And so I think that's a very, very important aspect of the benefits of a home rule city. Your sign up there says 1977. This form of government was set up in 1977, and it's worked fine, and y'all have grown tremendously under it. This is, if the voter, and it's the voter's choice, if the voters approve it, it sets up the structure of government for the 21st century for y'all to manage what you need to manage.
Brady, if I could get you to clarify this real quick, because I don't want the council or the public, our ability to annex is predicated on an annexation plan that's adopted, and it's essentially a 3-year process. It's not like we will be able to go out and just start bringing property in right away. I just want to make sure that that's
Thank you, CJ, because when I read the section 2.03, this is what it reads. Authority to annex and disannex, and it has A and B. And A says the city shall have the power to fix the boundaries of the city, to extend the boundaries of the city, and annex area adjacent to the city, and to exchange area with other cities. Great. B, any area of the city may be disannex pursuant to any procedure allowed under state law whenever, in the opinion of the city council, there exists within the corporate limits of the city a territory not suitable or necessary for city purposes. One more sentence.
Yeah.
The city council may discontinue said territory as part of the city by ordinance after conducting a public hearing on the matter. So it's a really nice letter of the law, very factual, but as CJ said, I don't really see any years on when we can start annexing, so what I'd like to see is some guidance around that. It's probably not in the document itself, but where can we find that?
Well,
Yeah.
can I just say that predicating all that is on general powers, that we shall have the power of local self-government to the fullest extent permitted by law, and shall have all powers possible for a city to have under the Constitution and laws of the state of Texas as fully and completely as though they were specifically enumerated in this charter, with all implied powers necessary to carry into execution those powers, and those express and implied powers necessary for the government, interest, health, welfare, and good order of the city and its inhabitants. So would it incorporate the details of what Ms. Messick's asking, in addition to incorporating your specific example on, that you gave about regulating
A
children?
home rule charter gives you all the power that the state has. So you're your own little state. Except for when the big state, Texas, says you can't have that power. Like sales tax, they're gonna get their 6 cents before you get your 2 cents. And you can't go above the 2 cents. To answer your specific question, typically charters don't reference the state law because state law, or reference a section to state law because state law is constantly changing. For the last, well, since I've been a lawyer, I started it before then. Started in the late 70s, they're codifying, they're putting everything in codes. And so what may be Vernon's annotated statutes, blah, 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 is now Business and Commerce Code, section so-and-so. So that's why it's not in there. As far as annexation, did you know Alvin was a seaport? I didn't know Alvin was a seaport until I represented Missouri City and we tried to annex part of Sienna Plantation. And they had these great annexation wars. And Alvin annexed a 100-foot wide, 135-mile long loop in Brazoria County that touches San Luis Pass. So they are like Galveston. They did that in the 30s, or the 30s. They did it because Hitchcock was a big threat. You can see how big a threat they are now. That's when the legislature stepped in with the annexation laws. And so there are certain constraints. Most cities, like Houston, hasn't annexed. I don't think that East Parker annexed anything, or nothing controversial. And before her, Bill White didn't. Mayor Bob was the last one that annexed Kingwood, that caused a great annexation war in the legislature, which changed all the laws again. So everything the city does under a charter still has to comply with state law.
I think all of this information that you have shared with us tonight is very, very valuable to share in a town hall format. Educate our public, educate us a little bit more about this. And, I'm gonna go back to saying, I think this could have been done earlier. I don't wanna cry over spilled milk, but educating us on the general provisions of home rule charter and, how, for example, I think authority to annex and disannex is very important for us going forward. So I'd like to know a little bit more about, not just from the home rule charter perspective, but the applied authority to annex and disannex after the charter is adopted or in the process of that.
I'll be glad to wax eloquently on that. There is a case, Granbury, or Crescent versus Granbury. There are 2 cases. I represented Crescent, and it was the great annexation war of Hood County. It's where I happened to grow up. And there is such a thing as a Court of Appeals injunction. So I can do that, but that's y'all's call if you want to have something that doesn't, tick tock, the clock still ticks on that responsibility to call an election. All this education whenever y'all wanna have it, can be done, during the spring.
CJ, how much did we budget in our most recent budget for our public education aspect of the charter, the town hall
For the
meetings?
whole process, we included, I think, $25,000.
Okay, so we have plenty of money to conduct town hall public hearing, or public meetings.
Yeah, we
To
can
educate everyone.
do the multiple
Great.
meetings.
Okay, because I figured we budgeted for that.
I think we had 25 in last year's and 25 in this year's.
Right.
So the total for the home rule charter process itself, do you remember off the top of your head what the total?
Well, we're right at 50.
How much?
Between the two fiscal years, right at 50, I believe.
That's just for the education part?
No, that's for the entire process.
Are we close to that?
We're bumping up against it, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so how much do we have in contingency? Because we're paying
We've got 85,000.
85,000, 4,000 for the opinion we just got from Mr. Zek.
Right, we've got 85,000.
Okay.
In
Well,
addition to that?
81 at least.
81, yeah.
I gotta pay Mr. Zek his 4,000 for his opinion.
Any questions about the charter provision?
Questions? Any further comments or questions?
Well, I figure since this is a workshop and we're sending it back, I want to make sure that we've got everything out that we need to have out, and so that we can timely call this. I mean, if we're working on drafting our ordinance for the election chart, Misty, I don't mean to put you under a time constraint, but I know we have 2 precincts, and I know that just happened January 1. But is that information pretty readily available from our county clerk?
I'm sure I can get it.
Okay. All right. So I want to make sure that we have all of our information so we can start the education process, and if our commission needs to reconvene, then we need to
All
take care of that.
132 pages of the agenda and minutes are on the city's website.
As is the proposed charter, right?
And
Yeah, I think we did get the corrected version, so we probably need to go back to the previous version, but
all that was
We'll verify that.
we don't have a signed version.
We would have
Yeah,
some-
we have a final version.
And if y'all want to put this up, I also included a survey that came out of Logic. That's a good, quick way to see.
Is that the one with the circles on
That's
the?
the one with the circles. That's a good, quick overview of what's in the charter. And also the timeline. I mean, none of this stuff is confidential. Put it all up on the website. It's all out there to educate the citizens.
Great, it's one good document that you sent to us to review, that's probably document to work.
I'm not sure why
Yeah, there was
this is
just
the
a-
old one.
Somebody had reported to me that the old one, I thought was,
Last time I checked, I sent you that email and said, the most current one has December 15th at the very bottom. The only difference is, my numbering was off, that one of y'all pointed out to me. It was 7.1 instead of 7.01, and so I'll put the other digit in there on those. And, I had changed the one on, it said the city shall appoint the municipal judge. I changed that to the city shall appoint, the municipal judges. And if you ever want to appoint more than one, you have the power to.
This doesn't have a date, but.
CJ just pulled up the one on the website, it doesn't have a date on the front, so we will ensure that the approved and recommended document from the commission is the one that's available.
The one in your Dropbox is the most current one.
Correct. It does have a date on it.
yes.
Okay.
Is there, I hate to belabor the point, but I just must, on the procedures and processes. So going forward, I understand we're gonna have public meetings where we're gonna educate the public on the process, right? Not the process in the past, process going forward, the transition, the implementation, what happens next? So the public can just go and vote yes without any, confusion or questions. So I'd like to make sure that we're working on that as we integrate that into our process.
Sure.
Tommy, I
And,
think it's more for you, yeah.
Right, and maybe as we hold public meetings, as we, garner feedback. I know with sensitive issues like we did with zoning, we actually, CJ put together a pretty good frequently asked questions list that takes just the crux of the matter. They don't have to read the whole document. What is the annexation power of the city? And we can put some of those caveats in there to explain in layman's terms, so that it's clear what the document says.
Richmond had a public hearing. They weren't required to have a public hearing, but their minutes reflect they had a public hearing. 4 people showed up, 1 person asked a question. It adjourned and they went on to,
Mayor Kennedy thinks a part of one of our sessions coming up in the spring, that we have just a public, in addition to town halls, when we meet in regular session, have that as part of our agenda.
And I will note that in our conference call with Mr. Zek last week, he did make the comment that it was a well-written charter, so I want to thank Brady and the commission and Byron I probably should thank Byron mostly, right, Brady?
absolutely.
We're doing the heavy
But don't
lifting.
thank Tim.
Now, Tim's
Which
agenda
does he?
earlier,
He's Mr. Development.
but, and so that was very complimentary on his behalf, and so we appreciate the dedicated work that he put in.
And Charlie said it was very hard for him, I'm sorry, it was hard for him to try to review this with the minutes, although they were online. His main concern was, did the charter commission vet this, and did they make an informed decision? And that's why I went through bit by bit and showed you the minutes by page where the commission did that, so.
And you discussed that with him as well, right? With Mr. Zek, you discussed that with Mr. Zek as well?
Yeah, that's why it was an hour and a half phone call.
Right.
The minutes on the website, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Minutes on the website.
All except for the last meeting, which I don't think had been approved by as far as, I don't know, I know there's a date on the website, and it's not a holiday, so. Did we get those yet?
No, 16th or.
We have the minutes, from the last meeting, the
December meeting?
Yeah.
They're not.
They've been drafted, not
Okay, they've been drafted, they just haven't been approved by the charter commission. We can put them up and put draft on them. Till they approve them, I think.
Any further questions, comments?
I know there's a deadline for calling the election. Is there a target date that you had in mind? Regular meeting in January, regular meeting February, regular meeting would be too late.
I would like to shoot for the January regular meeting.
Ordinance is almost there.